Madeleine McCann. Madeleine McCann was born in May 2003 in Leicester, England, to Kate and Gerry McCann. Both Kate and Gerry were Roman Catholic doctors who met in Glasgow in 1993 and married 5 years later in 1998. It wasn't until about 5 years after their marriage that they welcomed Madeleine, followed by twins Sean and Amelie in February 2005. Together, the three children formed a close-knit family unit, often traveling across Europe on vacations and exploring new places. Kate and Gerry would later describe their family of 5 as the perfect nuclear family. Madeleine's parents described her as a vibrant and lively child with a naturally outgoing personality. She took on the role of leader among her younger siblings and peers, showcasing impressive social skills and engaging warmly with anyone who paid attention to her. Her openness often blossomed into a unique sense of humor, the kind only a bright and innocent child could create. Her ability to express herself, tap into her imagination, and communicate her feelings was exceptional. Madeleine's bursts of energy fueled imaginative play and storytelling with friends, helping her build strong connections with other children. However, Madeleine's boundless energy often left her parents exhausted, as she constantly sought attention from everyone around her. Her early years were marked by challenges as much as joys. Kate and Gerry recalled that the first 6 months of Madeleine's life were especially tough due to colic, which caused her to cry for nearly 18 hours a day. They said they had to carry her almost constantly to soothe her. Colic is a well-known condition in infants that causes severe abdominal pain and intestinal discomfort. After the birth of the twins, Madeleine's cries intensified into screams. Her parents described how she would often run around restlessly while Kate focused on caring for the newborns. This high-energy behavior, which would later be seen in all the McCann siblings, never diminished the deep love and happiness shared within the family. Friends and relatives echoed these feelings, emphasizing the strong bond and joy that defined the McCann household. They all witnessed firsthand Madeleine's brilliance and social inclinations while also noticing her protective nature towards her two siblings, often mobbing them when their parents were out. In fact, some associates of the McCanns believe Madeleine and her siblings' camaraderie stopped at the presence of secluded strangers or an unknown group of people. However, because she knew how to engage even in foreign situations, relatives believed Madeleine could get along with anyone if she was given the time. These careful observations and infinite effects of joy surrounded Madeleine all the way up until a vacation she and her family took to Praia da Luz in the Algarve region of Portugal. Settling in a well-known tourist town for British holidaymakers, the McCann family quickly linked up with fellow doctors and assorted friends, also vacationing in the area starting on Saturday. April 2007. Kate, Gerry, Madeleine and the twin youngsters were having a wonderful time on one of their many frequent trips, and all the good times seemed destined for picture books. That is until the night of May 2007. Barely a week before Madeleine's 4th birthday, Kate and Gerry went out for dinner only to return to their flat and find missing their resilient and radiant daughter because sometime between 8:30 and 10 o'clock p.m., Madeleine McCann disappeared without a trace, leaving a void in the hearts of not just her family but in the hearts of people around the world, launching an exhaustive search that would soon evolve into the most discussed missing persons tragedy of the 21st century. On April 2007, the McCann family travels to Praia da Luz, Portugal for a 7-day spring break getaway. The 1,000-person village is nicknamed Little Britain for the vast amount of UK travelers staying in the area. The McCanns retreat to 5A Rua Drive, Agostinho da Silva, a flat owned by a retired teacher from Liverpool. Throughout the next week, the McCanns family dines with 7 other friends and 5 fellow children. The adults known as the Tapa 7 consisted of Fiona and David Payne, Diane Webster, Jane Tanner, Russell O'Brien, and Matthew and Rachel Oldfield. All of the men worked together over the years and their respective families all got along wonderfully. On day 6 of the vacation, May 2007, Madeleine and her twin siblings hang out at the Ocean Club's Kids Club at the Praia da Luz resort, while her parents go for a walk at around 10 a.m. During breakfast, Madeleine asks her parents, "Why didn't you come when Sean and I cried last night?" An hour and a half later at 12:30 p.m., Kate and Gerry pick their children up from the Kids Club and have lunch back at Fiva before setting off for the swimming pool. At 2:29 p.m. that afternoon, Kate McKin snaps the last photograph taken of her daughter at the resort's poolside with the sun shining and Madeline smiling per usual. Between 3:30 and 5:30 p.m. Madeline and her siblings return to the kids' club and eat dinner together. At approximately 6 o'clock p.m. Kate brings her children back to Fiva while Jerry attends a tennis lesson elsewhere at the resort. Around 6:30 p.m. Jerry sends Tapa's 7-member David Payne back to the apartments to check on his wife and 3 children. When the tennis lesson ends at 7 p.m., Jerry returns to 5 a.m. and helps Kate put Madeline, Sean, and Amelie to bed. Their bedroom is fastened next to the front door of the flat and has a single window overlooking the car park and public street. The shutter is closed before the children fall asleep. Between 7:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m., Kate and Jerry clean up from the day's activities and share a bottle of wine together before heading off to dinner. At around 8:35 p.m., the McKin couple is the first of the friend group to arrive at the resort's top as restaurant, located just 160 feet away from the A5 apartment. They reserve a table overlooking their living quarters where the top of 5A could be seen. The resort staff leave a message in writing that the reservation is specific because the families have children sleeping back at the complex. 20 minutes pass by and a few more members of the top of 7 arrive at the restaurant at 8:55 p.m. As the friends begin their orders, Matt Oldfield quickly returns to the apartment complex to check on his flat and alert the Payne family that everyone else is waiting on them. 10 minutes later at 9:05 p.m., Jerry heads back to 5A to check on his own children. He walks through the unlocked back patio doors to avoid using the locked front door and potentially awakening the sleeping youngsters like they had been doing all week. Everything inside seems normal until he finds the children's bedroom door to be open about 45 degrees instead of just ajar. Suspicious, Jerry peers his head in but finds all 3 siblings fast asleep and accounted for. He closes the door back at 5 degrees, uses the toilet, and departs. This is the last confirmed sighting of Madeline McCann. A few minutes pass by and Jerry stops to speak with a friend and fellow holidaymaker, Jeremy Wilkins, at 9:08 p.m. on the road near the Tapa's restaurant. Throughout the next hour or so, members of the Tapa's 7 swap turns going back to their apartment complex and checking in on their respective children. At 9:10 p.m., Jane Tanner walks up the road to a flat and passes by Jerry and Jeremy Wilkins without their notice. On her way, she sees a man walking across the path ahead of her, carrying a sleeping young girl wearing pink pajamas in his arms. It's a peculiar sight but not uncommon to a resort with many families. Tanner finds her daughter safe in her room and returns to the restaurant. A little later at 9:30 p.m., Kate gets up to check in on Fiva once more. But fellow top of 7 friend, Matt Oldfield, offers to do it instead while he keeps an eye on his own family. Kate agrees and Matt travels to the McCann's apartment. Inside, he finds the door to the children's room open again. But to him it means nothing. Instead, he pops his head in the door quickly and sees the twins sleeping in their respective cribs. From this vantage point, he doesn't explicitly notice Madeline and leaves the quiet building assuming all is perfectly normal. A half hour passes by and Kate makes another 5 a check herself at 10 p.m. However, when she goes to push the children's door open, a draft of wind from inside the room slams the door shut. Kate enters with force and finds the window open and the shutter pulled up. The twins sleep soundly in their beds, but Madeline is nowhere to be found. Minutes later, Rachel Oldfield rushes to find fellow Tapa's 7-member Jane Tanner in her apartment and relays the news of missing Madeline. Jane immediately calls back to her sighting and explains, "Oh my God, I saw a man carrying a girl." Matthew Oldfield then travels to the 24-hour reception desk at the bottom of the resort's hill to alert them of the disappearance. An alarm is raised and police are called at 10:15 p.m. 15 minutes pass before the local authorities arrive at Flat 5A. Along with the police, around 60 staff members and assorted guests search the grounds for Madeline. An exhaustive hunt that lasts until 4:30 the following morning. At 11:10 p.m., special investigators from the police judiciary venture to the scene and discover the sliding glass door that was found open by Kate McKin has a lock. Both Kate and Jerry are unsure if they actually locked it at the beginning of the vacation. While resort employees unveil that the cleaning staff will often open the sliding windows to air out department interiors, the special investigators are unable to confirm if this was the case. By the early morning hours of 2 a.m., patrol dogs are called in to keep an eye on the search efforts. 6 hours later at 8 a.m., 4 rescue dogs arrive to sniff the area around the resort and attempt to catch a trail of Madeline at 5 a.m. Beyond. At 10 a.m., the local police finally set up roadblocks to monitor traffic both coming and leaving the resort and surrounding routes. Over the next 24 hours, up to 20 strangers outside of the main investigators and family members interact with the 5A apartment, later proving to taint much of the evidence and cause headaches for future forensic work. In the coming days, police began interviewing anyone and everyone associated with the resort or simply living in the area. Kate and Jerry rented a nearby home to stay close to the ongoing investigation. Over the next 11 to 12 years, despite efforts from Portuguese police, Scotland Yard, McKen Associates, private investigators, and public supporters, no solid lead has emerged in the search for Madeleine McKen. After flawed DNA results and sensational tabloid coverage, the case took on a unique place in the world of missing person tragedies. Madeleine's disappearance had such a profound impact that many in the UK and those close to the case divide time in two. Before Madeleine vanished and after Madeleine vanished, regardless of the cultural significance or the importance placed on this case compared to others, one truth remains: until she is found, all theories, evidence, and tips must be thoroughly explored until Madeleine returns home or her fate is fully understood. There are still critical points in the investigation that require close examination. From the start, investigators recognized how challenging it would be to identify suspects, referred to by the Portuguese as arguidos, because the disappearance took place in a bustling tourist area filled with locals and strangers passing through every day. The timing, during the busy late spring vacation season, meant there were countless faces both familiar and new, making the initial suspect list overwhelming. In other words, anyone could be guilty, but everyone was also innocent, a frustrating catch-22. Fortunately, police received a timely break when Jane Tanner came forward early with her unusual account from the evening of May 3rd. Her sighting of a man carrying a young girl away from the McCann's apartment complex would become the focal point of the early investigation and remain as the major case point in the eyes of the public following for almost 6 years. However, its importance isn't grounded by what it unveiled to authorities, rather grounded by what it distracted authorities from considering it took out more than a decade of the precious moments spent looking for Madeleine. Dubbed the Tanner sighting, Jane Tanner's testimony gave the first possible timeline of Madeleine's suspected abduction. As mentioned previously, Jane had traveled from the Tapas restaurant back to her flat to check in on her children at around 9:10 p.m. She walked down the road, passed by Jerry McKenna as he spoke with a fellow vacationer, and headed into the complex. Both Jerry and a second man would later say they couldn't remember seeing Jane walk by them that evening and due to the confines of the narrow street. Police initially believed Jane to be fabricating the entire ordeal. Yet Jane stuck by her following claims and highlighted that while Jerry and the vacationer didn't confirm her movements, they couldn't deny them either. A few minutes of walking later and Jane witnesses an older man with what appears to be a toddler in his arms. She says he was crossing the junction of Francisco Gentle Martins and Rua Drive, Agostinho da Silva, moving east and away from the corner of 5A where the McKin children's bedroom was located. His direction was first determined as suspicious as he was supposedly walking in the direction of Robert Murat's residence, a 34-year-old Portuguese suspect early on in the hunt. Jane Tanner described the unidentified man as a white male standing at about 5 feet 7 inches with dark hair and complexion that would indicate European or Mediterranean descent. He seemed to be 35 to 40 years old from a distance, wearing beige pants, a dark jacket, and the demeanor of a local. The girl he was carrying was wearing pink and floral pajamas cuffed at the legs, much like Madeleine was wearing. These descriptions were curiously withheld from the media until May, 3 weeks after the disappearance. A few months later, in October 2007, money from a fund set up by the McKen family was used for a forensic artist to recreate a simulated sketching of the Tanner sighting. The result is now one of the most famous images associated with Madeleine's case. Sadly, The intensive search for the man from the Tanner sighting turned out to be a 6-year red herring chase. In October of 2013, Scotland Yard finally identified a British holidaymaker who matched the TS description and fully cooperated with police. He explained that he was indeed carrying his own daughter after picking her up from the Ocean Club and heading back to their flat. To prove his innocence, the identified man dressed up in the same clothes as was mentioned in the TS report and visually matched to the specific profile detailed in the sketch. The man was also able to provide the clothes his daughter was wearing the night of the sighting as well, and once again, the alibi cleared when the unveiled pajamas bore likeliness to Madeleine's Eeyore set, but was in fact different. What frustrated authorities the most were the Tanner sighting wasn't the lack of information it provided, but rather the time it took away from other potential pieces of evidence and eyewitness testimony that would later prove vital. First off, the Tanner sighting led investigators to believe the main abduction took place between 9 and 9:15 p.m., which they based their impending reports on. However, after learning the Tanner sighting had little to no connection, they had to retrace their steps and recalibrate more than half a decade's worth of thinking. Thus, Scotland Yard turned their attention to another eerily similar sighting from the night of May 2007. This incident reported by Irish holidaymakers Martin and Mary Smith. The Smiths claimed that they saw a man carrying another child at about 10 p.m. in a location which was about 460 meters away from the McCanns in 5A. The Smith sighting man was walking away from the Ocean Club and nearing the beach at Rua 25 Dabril. The Smiths described the new figure as a male standing at about 5 feet 8 inches with shorter brown hair and a slim build. He seemed to be in his mid-30s from the Smiths' vantage point, and wore beige shorts, much like how Jane Tannen described the man in her sighting as not a tourist. The Smiths offered the same testament, going as far as to say the man seemed uncomfortable carrying the child. The girl he was carrying had blonde hair, pale skin, bare feet, and was wearing lighter-colored pajamas, again like what Madeleine was wearing. EFIT images were initially created back in February 2008 when the testimony was first recorded, but the entire sighting was muddied when Martin Smith thought Jerry McKin fit the profile of the Smith sighting man. Oakley International private investigators were quick to strike down the possibility since Jerry had been confirmed at the Tapas restaurant at 10 p.m. But the rumored confusion created sensitive press about the Smith sighting. It wasn't until February that it reverted law enforcement's attention and reset the timeline to the abduction happening just before the Smith sighting. While the Tanner sighting ended in lost time, it's sadly a common thread found in many missing persons cases and criminal investigations overall, where a lead seems revolutionary yet can take years only to find it was a dead end. Regardless of results, the sightings are also proof of just how vast the spiderweb of possibilities is with Madeleine's disappearance, and the preceding searches, and how one simple memory or visual can spawn thousands of theories that send everyone involved spinning in circles. One of the early theories cultivated by Portuguese investigators actually considered Kate and Jerry McKenna as suspects. The base of the claim was built by supposed DNA evidence found by cadaver dogs inside the family's rental car after Madeleine's disappearance, as well as DNA matching hers discovered behind the couch in the 5A apartment. This led police to draft a 10-page conclusionary report including wild ideas regarding a likely murder of Madeleine, a cover-up fake abduction that involved the top of 7 as conspirators to mislead police, and even a claim that the number of suitcases each member of the party brought to Portugal was suspicious in nature. Realistically, none of the theories made sense or had conclusive evidence to back it up. The DNA found in the car and in the flat were tested using flimsy DNA methods, and it was stated in the forensic reports that despite the matches to Madeleine's DNA, the sample sizes were simply too small to consider credible. Not to mention the hours upon hours spent questioning the McKen couple and their friends, who all cooperated fully and dedicated their testimony to truth and hope for Madeleine's fate. In fact, almost as soon as the disappearance was reported, Kate and Jerry set up a project called Madeleine's Fund, Leaving No Stone Unturned Limited, which immediately caught fire across the UK and raised thousands of dollars to help hire private investigators and allocate resources directly to spreading awareness. Unfortunately, the early consideration of the McKen couple as Arguidos fostered a tabloid firestorm that ended with lawsuits, defamation hearings, and unnecessary backlash that has turned a lot of the conversation around Madeleine's disappearance to gossip and unsubstantiated finger-pointing. Because Kate and Jerry was soon relieved of suspicion after these reports were filed, they have since been 100% cleared by the current authorities. There is no reason to consider their involvement as a realistic or plausible hypothesis and will not be considered any further. Another early theory proposed by investigators was a burglary gone wrong. According to records, the time between February saw an unnatural rise in burglaries and burglary attempts in the area, including 2 around the McCann's apartment in the 17 days leading up to their vacation. These reports suggested that a burglary went into place the evening of May, of which Madeleine interrupted after climbing out of bed and exiting her bedroom, hence why the doors opened further than Gary had left it. Then the burglar would have taken Madeleine as a precaution, leaving through the bedroom window since it faced the street outside of the resort. In April of 2017, Scotland Yard announced a foiled burglary attempt was no longer under consideration, after they had interviewed potential thieves in the area and other potential suspects, but found no evidence. While the theory wasn't completely ruled out, their focus would turn to other ideas. A third theory positioned by investigators but quickly disregarded is that Madeleine wandered out of her bedroom on her own accord and was taken by a passerby or fell into a construction zone nearby. These musings were first discounted by Kate McKinn, who reminded police that Madeleine would have had to open the patio doors on her own, close the blinds behind her, remember to shut the door again, operate the child-proof gate at the top of the stairs, and finally open and close the gate at the street level. All while being a 3-year-old toddler and unseen by resort members. It's also widely considered unlikely that Madeleine climbed out of the bedroom window on her own. The prevailing theory among private investigators and law enforcement is that she was abducted, possibly in a planned operation. This belief arises from reports of suspicious individuals seen near the A5 apartment complex in the days before Madeleine vanished, acting strangely or appearing to scout the area as part of a larger scheme. Over the years, police have been pursuing leads involving these suspicious men, known pedophiles, fake charity collectors, and criminals convicted of similar offenses who could be linked to the area in February. Ultimately, the massive media attention and expert commentary worldwide have flooded websites, editorials, and blogs with countless theories and conspiracies. Some crime scene experts who have examined Madeleine's disappearance argue that the evidence does not support an abduction and instead suggest she was murdered. Critics of the police investigation describe much of the work as guesswork, pointing out that the A5 apartment was mishandled from the start. At least 20 people entered and exited the room on the day of the disappearance in May 2007 before it was officially sealed off, and forensic testing wasn't conducted for months. Meanwhile, other vacationers were allowed to stay in the apartment, further contaminating potential evidence. This mishandling coincided with ongoing conflicts between Portuguese authorities and UK investigators, creating high tensions as multiple law enforcement teams arrived in Portugal and complicated the search. Adding to the turmoil, tabloid interference and intense media scrutiny of the McKinnon family distorted public opinion and made it harder for authorities to carry out their work smoothly amid constant pressure and suspicion. With the vast amount of possibilities, no theory can accurately be concluded as the answer. Authorities have released tens of thousands of documents and translated almost every single one of them. They've investigated over 8,000 claimed sightings of Madeleine and had counted in 2015 that they took almost 1,400 statements, collected over 1,000 exhibits, investigated 650 sex offenders and 60 persons of interest, not counting the next 4 years of research. As of today, Madeleine's case has received a 11,750,000 and funding, yet there are still so many unknowns associated with Madeleine's vanishing, and until they are resolved and police release every document, report, and case file, we must wait for new leads to surface while doing our part in spreading awareness. But let's take a look at some of the suspects. One way we want to help divulge information is by sharing a list of suspects still wanted in the hunt for clues leading to Madeleine. Due to the sensitivity attributed to the case and the unfortunate loss of time in the early years of the investigation, we won't be drawing our own hypothetical conclusion, instead highlighting critical police sketchings and efforts of people either acting suspiciously around the time of Madeleine's disappearance or who have raised red flags in a variety of situations around Europe. Firstly, we have an unidentified woman whose profile was released on August 2009. The woman in question was seen near Port Olympic Marina in Barcelona, Spain on May 2007, just 72 hours after Madeleine disappeared. She appeared agitated, was nicely dressed but kept pacing up and down the street by El Rey de la Gamba restaurant and bar. Two passing British men noticed the disturbed woman and decided to approach her. When one of the men who wishes to remain anonymous asked if everything was okay, the woman asked, "Are you here to deliver my new daughter?" No other details are known, but the British witnesses say that after their conversation, the woman had a colorful argument in Spanish with a local inside the neighboring pub. Again, no other details have surfaced except that the witness described the woman's accent to be of Australian qualities and appeared as an Australian Victoria Beckham lookalike. Next, we have an unidentified man who was spotted 3 different times by a fellow holiday maker Gail Cooper, who was in Praia del Luge on vacation from England. The first time she saw the man, he was walking in his lonesome under a heavy rainstorm along an abandoned beach on April 2007. Later the same day, the man with olive skin and shoulder-length hair knocked on Gail's door and pretended to be a charity collector, a popular con around the resort area during February. 2 days later on April, Gail saw the man for a final time hanging around a children's event sponsored by the Mark Werner Resort. Gail was called back to Portugal in February 2008 to work with the detectives on recreating the man's likeliness through 2 sketches. At first, the man was thought to be the same man whom Jane Tanner witnessed carrying a small child away from the apartments back on May. But when he was cleared, the long-haired man was confirmed as a separate individual. In 2010, private investigators released footage showing a man working near a white truck in inland Portugal. After reviewing the clips, Gail publicly identified the man as the same individual spotted at Praia de Luz beaches in February, despite differences like the absence of a mustache and lighter hair color. Similar witness accounts led to updated police sketches of these men. Other witnesses reported encounters with fake charity workers near the time Madeleine disappeared, providing descriptions that matched the sketches of these 2 men. Additionally, 2 fair-haired men were seen loitering near the McCann's flat in May and were believed to be of Scandinavian, German, or Dutch descent. Further IFID profiles of suspicious men emerged from old Portuguese police reports and were later shared with the public, showing more individuals linked to the area. The Smith sighting produced 2 different IFIDs of a man seen carrying a small child around 10 p.m. on the night of May 3rd. Another intriguing encounter prompted police sketches 3 days after Madeleine's disappearance. But these weren't revealed to the McKinn family or the public until over a year later, when the eyewitness spoke with Mirror magazine. Anna Stam, then 41 years old, made a call to Dutch police when she thought Madeleine and an older Dutch couple walked in her Amsterdam shop on May 2007. According to Anna, the man was between 35 and 40 years old with a mustache, dark-skinned and spoke Portuguese. The woman he was with was a little older, maybe in her 40s with brown hair and spoke French. Accompanied with them was a little girl. The following are direct quotes from Anna in Mirror magazine who said, "I'll never forget the girl. She had her hair in a ponytail, huge green-brown eyes, a pale face which showed no emotion. I didn't like the man. He didn't look like a nice person. I work in a party shop so most people smile when they come in to buy things, but he didn't smile back at me when I smiled at him. He had no sparkle in his eyes. He was short with me and seemed angry. I got the feeling he didn't want me to interview with him and the others. The woman was also peculiar, acting stressed and uncomfortable," Anna said. "She tried to smile at me, but it was out of obligation, not from the heart. The whole way they reacted made a big impression on me." The man spoke in Portuguese. "I know because I have Brazilian friends." The woman spoke in French while the little girl spoke English. It didn't seem like a real family. When the girl spoke, she allegedly mentioned my name is Maddie followed by she is not my mummy. They took me from my holiday. I later recalls thinking the woman told me she was in a station wagon, a larger car. Maybe they were going on a long journey because this woman spoke French. I immediately thought that they would go to Belgium or France. This would later connect the dots with early police theories that feared Madeleine had been taken by a Belgian pedophile gang, followed by 3 separate sightings of Madeleine lookalikes in Belgium after May because Anna wasn't 100% certain that they were any criminal acts associated with the encounter. She didn't report it to the police right away until a month later when she saw the Madeleine McKenna case discussed on television. The Dutch police created EFIDs and sent it along to Portuguese police on June 2007, but the info never made it to the McKinn family. So when it heard that over a year later in the February, the McKinn family had no knowledge of her testimony, she took it upon herself to connect with the current British law enforcement covering the case and cycled back through her memories. Thus, the sketches of the French woman and Portuguese mustached man were created. Leaving Anna fearful her testimony came too late and the potential lead lost in translation. Probably the most disturbing police sketch is that of Pockmarked Man. The man in question was seen multiple times hanging around the McKinn apartment by 3 separate witnesses, all in the time frame of the McKinn's vacation. The first witness, a 12-year-old local girl who saw the pockmarked man outside the balcony of A5 at 8:15 a.m. on April 30th. In her own words, the girl said, "I was walking to the school bus stop. I go this way to school every day. I saw a man on the small path behind the block. He seemed to be looking at the balcony of the ground floor apartment. My grandparents used to live in that department, so I always look at it as I pass by." A few days later on May, the day before Madeline disappeared, the girls saw the same man looking at the McCann's flat again around lunchtime. The second witness was a female British tourist who recorded the following. "I saw a man acting suspiciously on 2 occasions. The first time I saw him, I was walking along the road with my daughter. I grabbed my daughter's hand and pulled her towards me because for some reason the man unnerved me. The next time I saw him, he was standing on the opposite side of the apartment. He was watching it. I would describe him as very ugly with pitted skin with a large nose." The third witness, a man from Cheshire, was walking with his partner at 11:30 a.m. along the road by A5 but couldn't remember if it was May. He said, "Saw a man standing next to a wall. On the opposite side of the road was a white van. I paid particular attention to him because he appeared to be focused on watching the apartment block. As I walked past him, I looked at him and for a split second we had eye contact, but then he just carried on staring at the apartment." All 3 sightings have incredibly creepy backstories to them and truly sends shivers down the spine when inspecting the man's sketch. If Madeline's abduction was pre-planned, finding the figure who was seen multiple times by multiple people analyzing the McCann's living quarters could lead to valuable information. If the man in these testimonies or any of presented drawings rings a bell at all, please speak up and say something. Even though it's been almost 12 years since that tragic night in Praia de Luz, we must remain diligent in our pursuit for Madeline's captor or anyone who might be involved. We'd love to make detailed videos about every single possible suspect, but there are so many involved it pains us to leave out smaller players who could still have a big role. We recommend everyone who's interested in the case to research the other persons of interest, and we have provided some useful links in the description. Madeline wasn't just a ray of sunshine, but also a child constantly absorbing knowledge with the potential to grow into a gifted and gracious human being. She was stripped of that opportunity, but the chance to rekindle her spirit isn't gone forever. There are still no signs or evidence suggesting that Madeline is no longer alive, and until proof says otherwise, we must hold on to the belief that her heart continues to beat somewhere in the world. Whether she is in Europe or beyond, her spirit and will to survive remain undiminished by the passing years. Her lively soul and kind heart deserve our compassion, attention, and relentless commitment. This little girl, who loved to express herself, show affection for her family, and find beauty in life's innocence, needs our help. It would be a betrayal of our shared humanity if we didn't keep faith in the efforts to find Madeline or uncover direct evidence that reveals what happened to her. To stay informed on the case, visit findmadeline.com, where her parents regularly update blogs about their family's journey. If you or anyone you know has information about the case, you can fill out a contact form on the website, email, investigationfindmadeline.gmail.com, mail to investigationfindmadeline.gmail.com, or call the hotline at +4 48-4 58-3 84-699. Edward Anthony Neese. In October 2003, 2 fishermen discovered the body of a man in a drainage area on freight property in Bensalem, Pennsylvania. The man had no identification, and his description did not match any missing person reports from the area. An autopsy revealed no trauma to the body, and the cause of death was determined to be drowning. However, the manner of death could not be determined, according to police. He was estimated to be between 30 and 40 years old. Bent Salem police compared the unknown man to numerous missing person reports over the next 19 years without success. He was buried beneath a marker bearing a placeholder name in the Doylestown Cemetery, while attempts to identify him continued. A former Bent Salem Township police detective and cold case investigator, McMullen, 54, became preoccupied with finding a modern way to solve open-ended cases. In 2022, he founded Cold Case Initiative, a nonprofit that helps fund such investigations, which can be expensive. In December 2022, Ben Salem police obtained hair samples from the Bucks County Coroner's Office that were collected at the autopsy. The samples were sent to a private laboratory which obtained a DNA profile. The funding was received from Cold Case Initiative. In October 2023, the search and subsequent investigation led investigators to speak with a man that said his son went missing around the time the body was found. He provided a DNA sample and it was a match. The body was then identified as Edward Anthony Neese. "This one is our first solve," McMullen said Tuesday. "We are so excited." Edward's father, 75, a retired diesel mechanic, said that these days he is still feeling foggy, a little confused about it all. "I waited 20 years for word about my son," he said. He and his former wife would go to police stations to file missing persons reports and to check in to learn whether officers had picked up any clues. "This was before cell phone days when you could maybe find someone," he said. He added that the spot where his son was found was not far from his home. "I just found it extremely hard to believe someone could go missing less than a mile from your house. And it takes 2 decades to find out," he said. "I do not know what to say. I have felt relief but sadness, but then I get to have closure." He was buried properly. "His mother and I have been up to the cemetery, and we changed that nameplate from an unknown to his name. We are now in the process of putting up a gravestone." Edward, who was 31 when his body was discovered, had worked as a forklift operator at a trucking firm in Delanco. He was really happy, making real good money. Things were going well for him, but the Ben Salem police stated that they would like to acknowledge the dedicated work of the Ben Salem Township Police Department detectives and the Cold Case Initiative partnership. Without their help, the family of Edward Anthony Neese would still be left wondering what happened to their loved one. Although the man has been identified, officials have not revealed whether the manner of his death has been determined or if foul play was involved. Moving on to the next case. Julie Ward. Julie and Ward's passion for wildlife photography led her to Africa in 1988. A skilled photographer, she had long dreamed of capturing the continent's wildlife up close. Tragically, her dream was cut short when, just before the conclusion of her journey, she disappeared without a trace. This sparked a long and relentless search by her father, John Ward, who dedicated the next 35 years to uncovering the truth of her fate. Julie was remembered by her family, particularly her parents, John and Jan, and her 2 younger brothers, Tim and Bob, as someone whose love for nature and adventure left a lasting mark on those who knew her. Julie's journey took her to Kenya, where she embarked on a tour of some of Africa's most renowned wildlife reserves. She was part of a group organized by a travel company, but she had a keen interest in venturing out on her own to capture more intimate shots of the animals. Julie's love for photography led her to be particularly drawn to the Masai Mara, a popular destination known for its diverse wildlife. However, on September 6, 1988, Julie's journey took a tragic turn. She was last seen on a remote part of the reserve, but by the time she failed to return to her group, panic set in. Despite an immediate search effort, there was no sign of Julie. Her disappearance became a major mystery, with many wondering if she had encountered an accident, been attacked by wildlife, or worse, had fallen victim to foul play. During her stay at the Weld-Dixon estate, Julie formed a strong bond with Paul and Natasha. The couple often invited her to join them on outings and excursions, and Julie became very comfortable with them. She also spent a lot of time with their dogs, enjoying the peaceful and scenic surroundings of the estate. Julie continued to photograph wildlife in the area, even capturing some of the local animals on their property. As her time in Nairobi drew to a close, Julie began making plans to visit other parts of Kenya. She was particularly excited about going to the Masai Mara, where she hoped to witness and document the Great Wildebeest Migration, a rare and awe-inspiring natural event that had been a dream for her as a photographer. Her trip was meant to culminate in the stunning images that would showcase her passion for wildlife, but her plans would soon be interrupted in the most devastating way. She later rented a cottage from the couple's neighbor in August of 1988. On the September 2nd, Julie and her Australian friend, a biologist, Glenn Burns, drove to Masai Mara in Julie's second-hand Suzuki Jeep, which she had purchased in Nairobi. The two had planned to watch the annual wildebeest migration from neighboring Tanzania's Serengeti National Park into the Mara. They set up camp at the Sand River campground. The next day, the two drove across the park, but were interrupted in their travels by their Jeep breaking down. The delay in fixing the Jeep left Julie stranded at the Mora Serena Lodge for a bit longer. Despite the inconvenience, she made the best of the situation, enjoying the lodge's serene environment and continuing her photography work. Julie kept in touch with her family and friends, reassuring them that she was safe and well, though clearly growing frustrated by the delay. Having returned to Nairobi for his conference, kept his promise and arranged for a replacement fuel pump to be sent. During her solo stay, Julie continued to make the most of her time in the area, and she was in high spirits when she spoke to Glenn on the phone, eager to return to Nairobi and resume her travels. However, little did she know her next few days would lead her down a dark and dangerous path, marking the beginning of a mystery that would go unsolved for decades. On July 6, 1988, Julie was last seen alive at the lodge. Despite the promises of a quick return to Nairobi, she never made it back. Her sudden and mysterious disappearance would send shockwaves through her family and friends, sparking an intense search for answers that would last for years. He sent that replacement pump on the September 5th. However, it arrived late in the day, so Julie spent yet another night at the Mars Serena Lodge. On September 6th, around midday, Julie left Serena Lodge for Sand River Campground. Her plan was to collect the two tents that she and Glenn had left on-site 3 days prior and after grabbing her gear. Her intention was to head to Nairobi. Davin Joko, a clerk at the Sand River Campground, saw Julie at around 2 p.m. inside the campground. After leaving the campsite, Julie's journey seemed straightforward, as she was heading towards Kikarock Lodge, a known waypoint on her route to Nairobi. Constable Gerald Karwar's account of helping her dismantle the tents and witnessing her departure at 2:30 p.m. added a degree of certainty to the timeline. However, from this point onward, Julie's whereabouts became a mystery. Despite the clear path ahead, Julie never reached her destination. The next known sighting of her was non-existent. As the hours passed without any contact or indication of her arrival at Kikarock Lodge or further progress, her family and friends grew increasingly concerned. The case took a disturbing turn as Julie's Jeep, along with all her belongings, was later found abandoned. But where was Julie? Her sudden disappearance amid the vast, rugged terrain of Kenya raised many questions, and the search for her became one of the most perplexing and unresolved mysteries of the time. She had booked a plane ticket back to England on 10th of September, and before she was to leave, she had planned to spend some time with the Weld-Dixons. When Julie did not show up on 6th nor 7th, the two got worried and contacted local hospitals and police stations along the Nairobi-Mara Road, fearing that Julie might have been in an accident. When she did not appear for her flight on 10th, the Weld-Dixons reported her missing and notified Julie's father, John Ward. John took a flight to Kenya, arriving on the September 12th. By this point, Julie had been missing for 6 days. The discovery of Julie's abandoned Jeep in the Makindi stream was a pivotal moment in the search, but it only deepened the mystery surrounding her disappearance. Despite the Jeep being found, there was no sign of Julie, no footprints, no personal belongings scattered nearby, and no immediate evidence to suggest what had happened to her. The absence of her was unsettling. The police arrived quickly and an investigation was launched, but the terrain was difficult and the search area was vast. While the discovery of the Jeep provided a starting point, it also raised further questions. Had Julie been abducted, or had something else occurred that led her to leave the vehicle behind? Had she been injured, or was there a more sinister force at play? John Ward, refusing to give up hope, continued his relentless pursuit of answers. The search effort was extended, and many questions still lingered, with no clear leads emerging despite the extensive resources and time dedicated to the search. Among the items found inside the car were a map, 2 bottles of beer, a pair of binoculars, as well as some personal belongings. John found the location of the car odd given that it was off of the road and appeared to be heading towards the river. However, the SOS written in the dust on the roof of the Jeep filled him with hope. Perhaps Julie had her car break down again and had decided to walk on foot. Later that same day, Chief Game Warden, Simon O'Macallow, stumbled upon a suspicious burned-out campfire. The campfire was located near Ole Modiak Gate. Upon further inspection, he discovered human remains amidst the ashes. John rushed to the scene. In the ashes, he found the left leg, jaws, spinal column, and the lock of hair. A skull was found in a nearby bush 1 month later. The rest of the body appeared to have been burned to ashes. John, in a later interview, said, quote, "The fire was about 4 feet in diameter. In it, there was a mug, some burnt sunglasses, and film cassettes. Even though I knew it had to be Julie, I wanted to go through the ashes to see if there was something I could find and identify. The odor was one of burned flesh. The fire itself was black and oily. I could find nothing that I could identify. The gathered evidence was peculiar, lacking any signs of a struggle nor blood. There was also the faint smell of petrol." The first autopsy was done by Kenyan police pathologist, Dr. Adele Shaker, who confirmed that the remains were that of Julie Ward. In his report, Dr. Shaker noted that, among other things, the remains have been cut using a sharp implement and there were subsequent attempts at burning them. To him, this pointed towards a clear case of homicide. However, the official investigation into Julie's death presented a conflicting narrative. While Dr. Shaker unequivocally deemed Julie's death a homicide, stating that the lake was cleanly cut and drenched in petrol before being set on fire, the police disputed this conclusion. Instead, they proposed a theory suggesting Julie was struck by lightning and subsequently mauled by a wild animal such as a lion. When a copy of the autopsy report was eventually seen by her father, it was crudely altered with words crossed out or typed over. John said, where Dr. Shaker had typed "cleanly cut" as far as the leg and jaw were concerned, these words had been changed to "torn and cracked." You were starting to talk about an attack by animals and not human beings. It was later found that the autopsy results had been altered by Dr. Shaker's boss, Dr. Jason Kavita, a health advisor to the Kenyan government. In a later interview, Dr. Shaker said, quote, "He took the report. I heard him saying, 'No, no, no,' and saw him underlined through some words. I saw him underlined through the words 'cleanly cut.' He said it was only my opinion. I wasn't happy about this, but Dr. Kaviti was my boss." John took Julie's remains to England and a second postmortem was carried out by Professor Austin Gresham. This second autopsy confirmed Dr. Shaker's initial findings. The investigating police officer in charge of the case, Superintendent Machiri Wanjo, speculated that Julie may have been depressed and may have gone on to commit suicide. He further suggested that Julie was sexually promiscuous. Dr. Shaker said Superintendent Wanjo told him that Julie was, quote, "a loose girl." The superintendent spoke of suicide and how she could have cut her off and may have lit a fire, which could have spread. Kenyan investigators were reluctant to call the death a murder and refused to conduct a homicide investigation. John Ward accused the Kenyan government of wanting to cover up the murder in order to protect the country's tourism industry. Due to this, John Ward decided to launch an investigation of his own. Over the years, he has made several trips in a desperate search for the truth. Following the discrepancies in the autopsy report, an inquest was held into Julie's death in Nairobi. During the inquest, when questioned about the alterations of Julie's death certificate, Dr. Kavita faulted Dr. Shaker's English, arguing that the Egyptian's command of the English language was poor and that his own motive in altering the report was only for the purposes of precision. Yet, at the same hearing, Dr. Kavita admitted that out of hundreds of autopsy reports Dr. Shaker had written in the past, this was the first time his lack of English precision had necessitated the editing of his report. Inquest also heard the findings of Professor Austin Gresham, who confirmed Dr. Shaker's findings, stating that the injuries on Julie's jaw and her skull indicated she had been decapitated from behind with a sharp blade. The magistrate eventually concluded that Julie was murdered by a person or persons unknown. However, He ordered that no further investigation was required. In February of 1990, at John's urging, the UK Foreign Secretary, Douglas Hurd sanctioned an inquiry by Scotland Yard investigators, who subsequently travelled to Kenya in order to probe Julie's case. The initial investigation led to the conclusion that two park rangers, Peter Capon and John Majori, were responsible for Julie's murder. The investigation revealed evidence placing Julie at the gatepost. Both rangers had been in the Masai Mara Reserve that day, linking them to the scene. However, during the subsequent trial, confusion arose regarding the clerk and the police constable's testimonies. The clerk, David Chako, and the police constable, Gerald Kairuri, were the last people to see Julie when she left Sand River Campground to go towards Nairobi. They came under suspicion during the inquest when Scotland Yard detectives were able to prove that Julie's signature had actually been forged. The clerk, David, had entered Julie Ward's details in the gate register and had signed her name to make it appear that she had signed herself out of the game reserve. Initially, David remained adamant that Julie herself had signed out and had left the Mara. After handwriting experts confirmed that it was not Julie Ward's handwriting, David admitted that actually he had made the entry and had signed against Julie Ward's name afterwards. He said it was not because he wanted to create the impression that she had left Amara when he knew she had not, but because he had forgotten to give her the register to sign when she had already left. He says that as she was already gone, he was forced to sign on her behalf in order to save himself from possible disciplinary action for lacking vigilance in his work. While both the clerk and the police constable claimed they saw Julie leave the campground alone, a later unnamed witness told investigators that they had actually seen an armed man in military fatigues sitting inside of her car. Despite this, all four individuals, the two park rangers, the clerk, and the police constable, were acquitted due to insufficient evidence. Later, the chief warden of the reserve, Simon McCalla, became a suspect himself after it was found that he had actually not ordered a search for Julie by any of the 113 rangers under his command. At 11 a.m., on the day Julie's Jeep was spotted, McCullough was informed immediately. However, rather than swiftly heading to oversee the ground search, he instead drove 50 kilometers in the opposite direction to Serena Lodge. Not until mid-afternoon did he eventually reach the scene. By then, more than 30 individuals, including rangers, police, and council workers, had already been there and departed for the search. Before towing away the vehicle, police removed Julie's personal belongings and transported them to Sand River Police Post for safekeeping. Among the items removed were maps, a pair of trainers, 2 bottles of beer, binoculars, and various other items such as tents and sleeping bags. When McCullough finally arrived on the scene at 3 p.m., there was no one at the vehicle. However, during the trial of the two park rangers, McCullough told the judge that after he arrived on scene, he, quote, peeked inside, and in the car he said he saw maps, a pair of shoes, 2 bottles of beer, and a pair of binoculars. The inconsistencies in McCullough's statements, coupled with his prior knowledge of the Jeep's location and his dubious behavior, fueled suspicions that he was somehow involved in Julie's disappearance. His claim of never driving, despite witnesses contradicting him, raised red flags, especially considering he had driven John Ward during the initial search. The fact that he was the one to arrive at the Jeep's location 3 hours before McCullough's arrival, with items already removed from the scene, further suggested that he had prior knowledge about the Jeep's whereabouts. The oddity of the Jeep's location, off the main road and across difficult terrain, in a spot Julie, a seasoned traveler, would likely not have chosen, only added to the growing doubts surrounding McCullough. If Julie had been driving, it was hard to explain why she would have taken such a perilous route when a safer road was nearby. This mounting evidence raised serious questions about whether McCullough had played a role in Julie's fate, or if he was merely an unfortunate bystander to a far darker event. The investigation into his possible involvement continued, but his shifting stories only deepened the mystery surrounding the case. During the investigation, the police uncovered records of a motor accident involving a vehicle that McCullough had been driving. Moreover, McCullough had radioed at 4:26 p.m. to say that he had found Julie's remains. It was later discovered that McCullough had left the gully, where Julie's Jeep was found, at 4 p.m. For him to have found the body at 4:26, it would have taken him only 26 minutes to cover the 10-kilometer journey in a southeasterly direction in a desolate corner of the Masai Mara. When police tried to retrace McCullough's path, they discovered the quickest journey from the gully to the site of Julie's remains took precisely 26 minutes. This would mean that he traveled directly from Julie's abandoned car to her remains. The area where Julie's hacked body was discovered had no car tracks leading to it, and is identifiable only by a distinctly shaped large tree set among dozens of other smaller trees and bushes. The hidden and secret nature of the environment in which Julie was discovered directly contradicted McCullough's claim that his search was merely that of chance. His story of finding Julie's remains randomly was met by much public and private speculation. Those close to the case say such insider knowledge suggests that McCullough probably had prior information about this specific location. He claims he was led by vultures circling in the sky. But it was pointed out that you could not see an elephant that distance, much less the speck of vultures circling in the sky. A Swiss TV crew had offered their assistance to the investigation using 5 radio-equipped vehicles in the search for Julie. However, McCullough told them to mind their own business. The crew had also heard rumors about Jonathan Moy, son of then Kenyan President Daniel Arap Moi, somehow being involved in the murder of Julie. The crew had heard rumors that Jonathan had been seen with a group of men in the very same park. The Swiss TV crew recorded their account at McCullough's office prior to leaving Kenya. They said that they found McCullough sitting head in his hands, saying that he had been summoned to a meeting with President Moi. Just days after Julie's remains were found, McCullough disappeared from his post at the park. At first, the official line was that he was on leave, but it was later found he had been suspended. He never returned to his position of senior warden of the Masai Mara Game Reserve. One afternoon, while Julie's father was in Kekarak Lodge, he met a woman who told him, "The man who killed your daughter is Jonathan Moy." She said that she had heard allegations about Jonathan Moy everywhere in the park, particularly in the nearby village where Julie's remains were discovered. Later, a letter was sent from Kenya to the UK in which an unidentified writer recounted an incident from September of 1988, the exact same time that Julie went missing. The writer, employed at Kekarak Lodge, described standing near the lodge's gas station, waiting for transportation home. She remembered seeing 3 men dragging a white woman from a Land Rover into the government guest house, which was reserved for heads of state and VIPs only. Substantiating this further, in 1992, Valentino Orco Kadapo, part of a secret militia allegedly paid for by President Moi to target his political adversaries, in an interview that Julie was killed at Jonathan Moy's direction and in the presence of others. The Kenyan government has since repeated the existence of such training camps and has denied Gadipo's employment by them. In September of 1995, Gadipo spoke openly to the UK Daily Mail stating that he witnessed Julie's murder himself. He asserted that Jonathan Moy ordered for her to be killed after allegedly sexually assaulting Jonathan Moy denied any involvement in the case. He claimed he was on his family farm at Aldama Ravine, 250 kilometers away from Mara at the time of Julie's death. Due to his status and lack of evidence, nothing could link him to the crime and, therefore, no investigation was done. Valentin Kodapov fled Kenya in fear for his life after making such testimony and lived in exile until his death. Some suggested that Julie may have witnessed illicit activities and was consequently killed for what she knew. Others speculated she may have worked for the British intelligence agency and that she may have taken pictures of militia camps in the Mara. Such actions, they say, could easily get one murdered in the desert. In 1997, the Director of Criminal Investigations in Kenya appointed a new team of detectives in order to examine the evidence in Julie's case. McCullough was finally charged with Julie's murder. The DCI said that it was evident McCullough had not only deceived authorities about his awareness of the items in Julie's car, but that he was also deceptive about his knowledge of the whereabouts of her remains, and that he covered up her murder. Despite all this, he was acquitted due to lack of evidence. In 2012, John published a report in Nairobi Law Monthly claiming that Jonathan Moy killed Julie. He gave all of the information he had gathered over the years and published it for the world to see. In the report, he revealed that in 2009, former Superintendent Muachiri Wanjo, who had originally suggested that Julie's death was a suicide, contacted him to talk about what he now considered was Julie's murder. Wanjo claimed that after interviewing a number of civilians, rangers, and police officers, he had suspected Jonathan Moy for Julie's murder. However, he said that when he went to his senior officer with this information, he was told to, quote, look somewhere else. He then says he was forced to change his story and avoid any mention that Julie was murdered. He also claimed that McCullough was not involved in Julie's murder directly, but that he was told to get rid of her body. He finished his conversation saying that he wanted to meet John again and show him some papers on the various people interviewed. However, John never heard from him. He was later told that Wanjo had died. However, the circumstances surrounding his death was never released to the media. In the report, he also spoke of an informant who had previous ties with Jonathan Moy. This informant shared details and presented photographs of himself with Jonathan Moy. The informant alleged that on September 6, 1988, Jonathan, accompanied by his farm manager, his bodyguards and his driver encountered Julie along their route through the Masai Mara. He says that the conversation turned aggressive, resulting in Julie being sexually assaulted by Jonathan. The informant claimed that fearing Julie might report the assault, Jonathan instructed his bodyguards to kill her. The informant disclosed the names and locations of the bodyguards, the driver, and the farm manager. Additionally, he mentioned that the farm manager, Ibrahim Chubb, was married to one of President Moy's daughters and was a close personal friend to Jonathan Moy. Ibrahim supposedly distanced himself from his friend Jonathan due to these events. Allegedly, during an argument between the two, Ibrahim was heard to shout at Jonathan in anger, quote, one day I will blacken your name around the world for what you did to that girl in the Mara. In 1999, Ibrahim was killed in a car accident. When John Ward met Ibrahim's father, he claimed that Ibrahim was not actually the victim of a car accident, but that he had been murdered. He said that an autopsy report revealed marks on his wrists resembling rope imprints and significant bruises all over his body indicating severe blunt force trauma. The fellow grieving father said that the doctor suspected Ibrahim had likely been suspended by his wrists and beaten, fatally damaging his spleen. The father recounted details from a witness who say they saw a wooden log being placed across the road, which caused Ibrahim's car to swerve and crash. The witness says they observed Ibrahim retrieving a briefcase from the vehicle before being attacked by 3 hooded men. The witness said that initially she believed it was a robbery. Despite authorities labeling Ibrahim's death as an accident, his father believes his son was murdered due to the fact that he was about to reveal what he knew about Julie's death. He says that he was killed by Jonathan's associates in order to keep him quiet. Julie's father also reported that in 2004, a former Kenyan intelligence officer disclosed that he witnessed Julie's brutal murder in an anonymous interview with the Kenyan newspaper. He claimed that 3 men in the reserve assaulted and then murdered her. The officer detailed how Julie was coerced to drive her Jeep miles from the Sand River camp, positioning it in a gully. He says that she was then forced to create an SOS mark and dust on the roof of her car suggesting an accident and subsequently for help. The officer admitted to being too frightened to intervene at the time and said that he remained fearful of coming forward even years later. In 2018, Julie's father asked authorities to get the DNA of Jonathan Moy to confirm if he was responsible for his daughter's murder. However, nothing came of it. In 2019, Jonathan Moy died of pancreatic cancer. His father, the former president of Kenya, passed away 2 months later. With the death of both men, John Ward hoped that those who previously felt afraid to speak up would now summon the courage to come forward. So far, there has been no updates on the case and nobody has come forward to add additional details. Julie's father dedicated 35 years of relentless pursuit in seeking justice for his daughter's killer. John Ward's unwavering dedication to finding the truth about his daughter's disappearance is a testament to his immense love and determination. His self-financed efforts, including over 200 trips to Kenya and his personal investment of over £2 million, demonstrated his relentless pursuit of justice for Julie. His meticulous investigation, from interviewing witnesses to preserving DNA evidence, illustrated his tireless commitment to uncovering the truth. Even in the face of such a complex and unsettling mystery, John's passing in 2023, just after the loss of his wife, Jan, marked a heartbreaking chapter in a long saga. Yet, his sons, Bob and Tim, vowed to continue their father's mission, honoring both his dedication and Julie's memory. Their resolve to carry on John's work reflects the lasting impact of a father's love and the unyielding hope for answers, no matter how many years may pass. The search for justice and closure for Julie continues, fueled by the enduring legacy of John Ward's commitment. Eleanor Roberts Saratoga, located in Wood County, Wisconsin, is a city known for its ties to Silicon Valley in the southeastern Bay Area. This affluent residential community is celebrated for its wineries, restaurants, and popular attractions such as Villa Montalvo, Mountain Winery, and Hackney Gardens. Saratoga not only offers welcoming neighborhoods and friendly communities, but also boasts thriving industries and notable growth opportunities. The city is home to several distinct neighborhoods, each with its own unique charm, including Brookview and Pride's Crossing in the northern region, and Blue Hills and Greenbrier in the southwest. Congress Springs, located in the southwestern corner of Saratoga, is a charming area within the city. However, amidst the beauty of these vibrant communities, a heinous crime occurred in 1984. A 73-year-old woman was tragically and brutally murdered in her own home, leaving investigators with little evidence to go on. Eleanor Roberts, a beloved resident of Nakusa, Wood County, Wisconsin, was born on April 10, 1911. She was a cherished mother, wife, and grandmother, with her son, Marshall Roberts, living nearby in Saratoga. Known for her compassionate nature and her unwavering commitment to ensuring the happiness and well-being of those around her, Eleanor was a beloved member of the Saratoga community in which she resided in 1984. Unfortunately, tragedy struck when she least expected it, lurking just around the corner. The events that unfolded within the Roberts household on that fateful day, November 27, 1984, were undeniably chilling. Eleanor's brother grew concerned when she failed to meet him at an automobile dealership where she had planned to purchase a car. He subsequently went to her home on South Hollywood Road in Saratoga. However, when Eleanor did not respond to his knocks on the door, he reached out to her son, Marshall Roberts. Unbeknownst to Marshall, he was about to encounter a scene of horror that would haunt him for the remainder of his days. Aware of a hidden key to his mother's house located outdoors, Marshall made his way to her Saratoga residence. Upon unlocking the door and stepping into the house, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. The atmosphere was heavy, and an eerie silence filled the air. However, it wasn't until he reached the bathroom that he truly comprehended the gravity of the situation. As he opened the bathroom door, Marshall was confronted with a sight that he could never have anticipated. His mother, Eleanor Roberts, lay motionless on the floor, surrounded by her own blood. Shockingly, her head was concealed by a bath mat, which Marshall swiftly removed, only to be faced with an unimaginable scene. His mother's lifeless body bearing signs of violent trauma. In that moment, Marshall realized that he was standing in the midst of a crime scene, one that would forever alter the course of his life. Without hesitation, he dialed 911 and reported the tragic discovery to the police, providing them with the address. Within a matter of minutes, officers were dispatched to the scene. Soon after making the call, the Wood County Sheriff's Department detectives and forensic team personnel arrived, swiftly filling the premises. The forensic pathologist who conducted the autopsy determined that Eleanor's cause of death was a combination of blunt force trauma and multiple stab wounds, likely inflicted by a pair of scissors based on their shape and other factors. There were no indications of natural causes contributing to her demise, leading to the conclusion that her death was a result of homicide. As stated in the sheriff's office report, Eleanor had been brutally stabbed and beaten, sustaining broken ribs and punctured organs consistent with scissor wounds. Upon further investigation, authorities discovered that the only missing items from the house were a pair of scissors, a knife, and a telephone. Despite their efforts, the killer had left no discernible clues, leaving the authorities with a perplexing mystery to unravel. However, just as all hope appeared to be fading, a ray of light emerged in the form of a palm print discovered in the bathroom where Eleanor's body was located. The knife was found on Hillcrest Avenue in Saratoga on the same day, not far from Roberts' South Hollywood Road residence. The scissors were located the following day, approximately 1.25 miles away, and the telephone was recovered 4 months later in March 1985 in the Wisconsin River, about 2.5 miles away. On the day of Eleanor's passing, an officer found a ski mask hanging from a tree branch opposite Eleanor's house, as stated in the criminal complaint. The mask seemed to have been tossed there. The mask, knife, scissors, and phone were all discovered along the same path. Investigators speculated that the potential suspect resided along this route. Further examination revealed that the evidence trail led to Jonna Sarver, an employee at a store where Eleanor had previously bought a lawnmower. Sarver was initially interviewed on December 3, 1984, and mentioned spending time with another individual playing pool at Evergreen Lanes the day before Eleanor's demise. It was discovered that Eleanor had interacted with Sarver when she purchased the lawnmower from Compilation, where he was employed during the summer of 1984. The lawnmower required warranty repairs, which Sarver had carried out. When Eleanor lodged a complaint on May 1, 1985, Sarver was questioned again, confirming his last encounter with Eleanor in the summer of 1984, when he repaired the lawnmower she had bought. Following the identification of Sarver's palm print in the bathroom, he was interviewed once more. Sarver claimed his final interaction with her was in late summer, early fall 1984, aligning with other investigative findings. However, Sarver denied ever entering her home, raising questions about how his handprint ended up there. The other witness Sarver claimed to have been with during the murder was also interviewed. Although the witness couldn't recall all the details of that night, he stated that he never remembered playing pool with Sarver. During the interview, investigators discovered that Sarver had provided multiple alibis, none of which could be verified when they questioned the witnesses he claimed to be with. In fact, one of the witnesses Sarver mentioned confirmed to investigators that they were alone that evening. Throughout various interviews, Sarver gave inconsistent explanations of his whereabouts at the time of Eleanor's murder. None of his explanations or alibis could be substantiated by investigators. Another witness around the time of Eleanor's death informed investigators that Sarver was facing financial difficulties and had borrowed $2,000 from him. However, the witness stated that he was never repaid after the murder. In 2005, a confidential informant revealed to investigators that 17 years prior, Sarver had confessed to killing a woman by delivering a karate chop to her neck, which matched the injuries sustained by Eleanor. Several small claims cases were filed against Sarver since 2006 for unpaid bills, and another similar case was filed shortly after his arrest. Despite the mounting evidence against Sarver, the case eventually went cold. Lieutenant Robert Lewandowski, a retired investigator from the Wood County Sheriff's Office who worked on the case, mentioned that it often encountered obstacles throughout the years. Former Sheriff's investigator Jay Schroeder dedicated countless hours to organizing years' worth of information. Disagreements between investigators and prosecutors regarding the readiness to reopen the case were not uncommon, according to Lewandowski. For decades, the case remained unsolved, seemingly insurmountable. Nearly 30 years after the incident in May 2013, investigators obtained a search warrant to collect DNA from Jonna Sarver, who had long been considered a key suspect in the case following Eleanor's tragic death. Jerome C. Lippert, a retired business executive residing in the Pittsville area with a keen interest in local history and events, penned an article that was published in the Wisconsin Rapids Tribune on December 16, 2016, making a startling assertion. Not all law enforcement officers involved in the investigation should be commended. This revelation unraveled a narrative within a narrative. In the late 1980s, John Sarver worked as a civilian informant for the Wood County Drug Enforcement Unit under the guidance of Detective Brian Illingworth, also known as Big AI in the field. Illingworth, who later retired as a detective and former Wood County Sheriff, provided testimony during the trial. Despite his efforts to portray his collaboration with Sarver in a positive light, evidence presented in court indicated that the former sheriff had developed an overly close relationship with his informant. Notably, Sarver was not fingerprinted when he began his informant duties, a standard protocol that was only followed 2 years later by another officer. Moreover, Illingworth attended Sarver's wedding, a practice that was considered unusual. There were questions raised during the trial about Sarver being heavily intoxicated while under Illingworth's supervision, a clear violation of departmental regulations. In 1988, during the investigation into Eleanor Roberts' murder, A mysterious meeting occurred at a cabin in Adams County where Sarver and Illingworth were reportedly alone before other law enforcement officials arrived to interrogate Sarver. The contents of that private conversation, if any, have never been disclosed. Additionally, Lippert possessed crucial information that never surfaced during the trial. In the 1990s, a member of the Roberts family approached then-Sheriff Illingworth with a Reader's Digest article discussing advancements in DNA testing, hoping it could assist in their case. Regrettably, the sheriff responded insensitively, stating that the suspect was a friend of his, and dismissively returned the magazine. This type of response is completely unacceptable from any law enforcement officer when a grieving family member seeks justice for their loved one. It is now evident that not all police officers involved in this case deserve commendation. This attitude or conflict may have contributed to the delay in achieving justice. Additionally, there was a peculiar incident towards the end of Sheriff Illingworth's career in Wood County that may be relevant. It is possible that some long-term residents recall Illingworth being admitted to a Rock County institution in 1997, reportedly due to depression and struggles with substance abuse. Initially concealed from the public, this information eventually came to light, leading Illingworth to decide against seeking re-election in 1998. He retired from law enforcement without much attention the following year. In that same article, Lippert also mentioned a primary suspect at the time, although he couldn't disclose the individual's name for obvious reasons. However, that person was Mr. Sarver. Lippert also suggested that the entire story was not being revealed, and indeed, the trial confirmed the accuracy of his statement. He called for renewed interest in the case, prompting investigators to diligently pursue the killer of Eleanor Roberts. Wood County Sheriff's Officer, Heiser, stated, meticulously review the 5,600 pages of reports compiled over the years, and subsequently meet with all the investigators who had previously worked on the case. Sarver, the accused, was 21 years old when Eleanor passed away. He was employed at a business that sold her a lawnmower and had visited her residence to service it. Initially, he denied ever entering Roberts' home when questioned by the authorities. However, investigators later discovered his palm print on the bathroom counter, contradicting his statement. In April 2020, a witness who had chosen to remain anonymous finally came forward after almost 4 decades of suppressing his memories out of fear. This witness confirmed that there were indeed 3 individuals present at the crime scene in 1984. During the trial, Mr. Sarver was described as a scary dude due to his connections with the police, which instilled fear in the witness and prevented him from speaking up. However, in 2020, he mustered the courage to share his painful memories, realizing that it was better to confront them before it was too late. His testimony was incredibly compelling, leaving the courtroom in complete silence. According to the complaint, the witness informed investigators that he had heard Sarver confess to breaking into Eleanor's house through the rear entrance with the intention of robbing her, resulting in her accidental death. The criminal complaint also highlights the department's persistent efforts to submit DNA samples for testing from 1988 until 2020, utilizing increasingly advanced techniques as they became available. Unfortunately, the case faced a setback in 2020 due to the global pandemic following the pressing of charges. The Wood County Sheriff's Office and Wisconsin Department of Justice jointly announced that on August 27, 2020, John Sarver, the primary suspect in this case from Port Edwards, Wisconsin, was apprehended in connection with the first-degree murder of 73-year-old Eleanor Roberts. A found guilty Sarver, who had been detained with a $1 million cash bond, could potentially face a life sentence in prison. Sarver, through his legal representation, requested Wood County Circuit Judge Nicholas Brezett Jr. to postpone the trial initially set for March 14, 2022. Despite the plea, Roberts' son and Assistant Wisconsin Attorney General, Ney, acting as a special prosecutor, urged Judge Brezett to maintain the trial dates as per the online court records. Sarver's legal team, consisting of Jeremy Meyer, O'Day, and Taylor Hart, expressed the need for additional time to conduct interviews with witnesses and conclude their investigation. Consequently, Judge Brezett rescheduled the trial and set a hearing for updates on March 15. In November 2022, John Sarver was convicted of the murder of Eleanor Roberts. Due to the timing of the crime, the judge has no jurisdiction over Sarver's parole eligibility. Sarver is required to serve a minimum of 13 years and 4 months before being considered by the parole board. The parole commissioner must ensure that Sarver meets these 5 specific criteria before recommending parole: good behavior, completion of rehabilitation programs, reduced risk to the public, adequate time served, and an approved release plan. Judge Bro expressed his sentiments, stating, "The period between the murder and the arrest in 2020 was considered his parole as stated in the reports." County Sheriff Sean Becker mentioned that the arrest was the outcome of a collaborative investigation between the Sheriff's Department and the State Department of Justice, who will handle the prosecution of the case. During a press conference outside the Wood County Courthouse, Sheriff Becker described the homicide as a brutal crime that remained unsolved for an extended period. He acknowledged the frustrations experienced along the way, but emphasized that they never gave up. The prosecutors from the Wisconsin Department of Justice meticulously built their case, while the lead defense attorney diligently attempted to sow doubt. Despite the defense's efforts, the overwhelming evidence led to an unsuccessful defense. Finally, on November 2, 2022, in Branch 2 of Wood County Court, a guilty verdict was reached. Concluding the case on January 23, 2023, the sentencing of John A. Sarver for the first-degree murder of 73-year-old Eleanor Roberts brought justice to the case. This resolution serves as a significant achievement and a testament to the unwavering dedication of law enforcement. It provides closure to the victim's family and the community, reminding us that justice can prevail despite the passage of time. Moving on to the next case. Donald Rendell. In August of 2003, skeletal remains were discovered in Bradford Township, Minnesota, during an excavation project by a landowner along Highway 5 and County Road. The remains were believed to belong to a white male, estimated to be between 20 to 28 years old at the time of death, and it was apparent that the body had been buried for many years, likely decades. Authorities from the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension created a DNA profile of the victim in hopes of identifying him. Despite their efforts, the case remained unsolved for some time, leaving the identity of the victim a mystery. The DNA profile and dental records were entered into missing persons databases, but no matches were found. A facial reconstruction was made to try and generate clues to the unidentified person's identity. Unfortunately, no one came forward with useful information. Investigators named the man Asanda County John Doe, as they were unable to identify him. Over several years, investigators submitted DNA samples of people who believed that he was a possible relative of theirs, but no relatives could be confirmed. In 2019, Chief Deputy Lisa Lovering started the process of using advanced DNA technology to try and identify the remains. It was submitted to labs in 2019 and 2020, but the DNA sample was not suitable to be analyzed further. Then, in 2021, Lisa learned of Texas-based forensic laboratory, Othram Incorporated, which uses a newer technology called forensic-grade genome sequencing to build DNA profiles from skeletal remains. Othram was then able to develop a new viable DNA extract. They then built a comprehensive DNA profile. The DNA profile was sent to investigative genetic genealogy consultant Barbara Ray Venter and Chief Deputy Lovering. Within just 24 hours, Barbara Ray had a match of a distant relative for the remains. Based on the family tree, she was able to locate 2 siblings of the victim and a phone number. All of this information was passed to the investigators who worked on the case. They called the siblings. A family member returned the call and confirmed that their brother, Donald Rendell of Ramsey County, Minnesota, had been missing since 1970. They were told that the FBI had been looking for him prior to his disappearance due to involvement he had with drugs. Chief Deputy Lovering then met with the family and obtained DNA samples from the siblings. These samples were submitted to the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. In the start of 2022, it was announced that investigators were able to confirm that the Asante County John Doe is indeed Donald Rendell. Based on the information from the family, as well as from the scene in 2003, it is believed that someone took Donald's life. It is believed that Donald was buried in Asante County in late 1970 to early 1971, at the age of 22. It is further believed that there still may be people alive today who know what happened to Donald in 1970. Investigators are asking anyone with any information to contact the Osandi County Sheriff's Office at this number or Crime Stoppers of Minnesota. There was disbelief, Lovering shared, describing her phone call with Rendell's survivors. It was a random phone call. Someone calling about their brother they hadn't seen in 51 years. There was a lot of shock and disbelief at first. And I think once I got the DNA match, it set in a little more. But there's still a lot of unanswered questions for them. The case remained a mystery for over 5 decades, with no clear answers as to who was involved or what exactly happened to the young man. Law enforcement, however, continued to work tirelessly in hopes of bringing closure to the family. As the investigation unfolded, they were finally able to identify the victim and return him to his loved ones after 51 years of uncertainty. This breakthrough highlights the importance of law enforcement's dedication to giving a voice to the victims and ensuring that they are not forgotten. Lisa Ziegert. When 24-year-old Lisa Ziegert, who worked the night shift, went missing, both her family and the police feared the worst after traces of blood and signs of a struggle were found at her workplace. Despite an extensive search over the following days, their worst fears were confirmed when her body was discovered 5 kilometers from her workplace. For decades, efforts to apprehend her killer were unsuccessful. Finally, after 25 years, her loved ones have received answers about what happened to Lisa Ziegert. This case takes us to Agawam, Massachusetts, a small town near the western Connecticut border. Agawam is best known for the Six Flags amusement park, the largest of its kind in New England. The park features a wave pool, numerous water slides, and 8 thrilling roller coasters. Agawam also boasts Robinson State Park, a popular day-use park offering biking trails, fishing ponds, walking paths, kayaking, and cross-country skiing. The city's economy is driven by industries like construction, manufacturing, and retail, and its residents appreciate the convenience of living in Agawam. Most residents commute 25 minutes or less to work, making it an attractive place to live. Agawam is home to 3 elementary schools, including Agawam High School, which honors one of the town's most beloved teachers with a memorial, Lisa Ziegert, whose untimely death changed the city of Agawam forever. Lisa Marie Ziegert was born on the March 24, 1968 in Holyoke, Massachusetts to George and Diane Ziegert. Lisa grew up in a loving, tight-knit family. She had 3 other siblings named Sharon, David, and Lynn. Lisa and her family were residents of Agawam. Lisa developed a deep passion for music while growing up, learning to play several instruments. She even joined school musical groups during her youth. After high school, Lisa attended Westfield State University, where she pursued a degree in education and graduated in 1990. Lisa worked as an intern and took on multiple shifts as a counselor at a children's camp, enjoying every opportunity to teach. Teaching was a profession she truly loved. She took her profession seriously and was active at it in every way. She had also taught Sunday school at her church. After her internship was over, at the age of 24, Lisa accepted a position as a teacher's assistant at Agawam High School, where she had previously attended as a teenager. There, she worked primarily with a group of kids that had special needs. Lisa had a greater understanding of her students than any other instructor. She was also very professional and worked hard to ensure that every one of her students received the best education possible. Lisa was a very special person. With the kids, she always had a special rapport. They knew that she really liked them and that she treated them like people, Lisa's mom said. In the evenings, after the shift at school was over, Lisa also had a part-time job at the neighborhood Brittany card and gift shop. One fateful Wednesday afternoon on September 15, 1992, was typical for Lisa Ziegler. She had concluded her shift at the school. She left the school building around 4:30 p.m. and drove directly to the card and gift store, where she worked weekdays from 5 to 9 p.m. Her sister, Lynn, briefly dropped by around 5:30 p.m. to keep her company, because Lisa would always complain to her family about how bored, lonely, and scared she feels while at the shop at night. According to Lynn, during her visit to the store, there was no sign of Lisa being in a bad mood. She said her sister was cheerful the whole time that evening. and nothing seemed off. It was easy talk. It was sister talk. It was a little after 6 p.m. when I left. And then I went home and she was fine. You know, she was fine when I left, Lynn said. By 8:45 a.m. the next morning, Sophia Maynard arrived at the card and gift store, just as she did every day, to open up. She was supposed to start work at 9 o'clock. However, she was shocked to see Lisa's car in the parking lot. As Lisa typically worked at the school in the mornings and wasn't expected to be in the store while classes were in session, Sophia noticed that a light was on inside the store and the doors open sign was visible. At that point, Sophia thought that Lisa might have missed the school morning shift because of the incoming Easter celebration. She and Lisa intended to stuff some balloons for sale during that holiday. When Sophia entered the store, she called Lisa's name multiple times, but she got no answer. I called her name a couple of times and I figured she'd just pop her head out. She didn't. I came behind the counter. All of her things were there. Her drawings, her pocketbook, her car keys. And then, I just kind of freaked out, Sophia said. Everything looked strange to Sophia. She felt something was not right. She immediately dashed out the store and ran across the street to a restaurant there and then asked them to call the police. As soon as the police got there, they started inspecting the store. The front of the building appeared to be normal, but the back had a creepy opening. Approaching the storeroom at the back, officers discovered numerous shattered bags that had blood stains on them. They also found several cards scattered across the floor, covered in blood, which indicated a struggle between Lisa Ziegert and her attacker. Additionally, there were small dirt traces near the door, which investigators believed could have been from a shoe. Despite these clues, the investigators were unable to find any useful leads within the store. That morning, Lisa failed to show up at school, which was unusual for her. The principal called her mother to check if everything was okay with her, but Diane Ziegert had no idea where her daughter was. Her news of disappearance traveled the town of Agawam, and within hours, all of her friends, family, and acquaintances began to do all they can to bring Lisa back home. The police initial strategy to the case was to develop a robbery theory. But that theory was quickly abandoned when they discovered that the perpetrator had not accessed Lisa's wallet or cash register. The goods in the store were also not missing. The second approach the detectives took in the case was to retrace the timeline of what happened the previous evening. Investigators learned that Lisa's sister had left the shop around 6 p.m. They also spoke with store owners and neighbors near the card and gift shop. It was revealed that Lisa had a conversation with the owner of the carpet shop next door around 7:20 p.m. During their discussion, they talked about an ongoing issue with their local parking lot, which was being used by patrons of the nearby bowling alley. The shop owner informed Lisa that he wouldn't risk publicly criticizing the drivers who had parked in front of their stores. He claimed that many of them were crazy and dangerous. After about 15 minutes of conversation with Lisa, he left to go home. Police went through the cash register and discovered that the most recent time money had been deposited was 8:20 p.m. Investigators also located a woman who entered the store at about 9 p.m. She said the store's door was open but nobody came out to attend to her, so she left. Before taking her leave, she claimed to have heard noises coming from the back room. She said it was a banging noise, but she didn't think much of it and decided to leave. The police were able to determine the general time frame of Lisa's disappearance. She finished attending to her last customer at 8:20 p.m. and by 9 o'clock, something had happened to her. The detectives were then left with the questions of what had happened to Lisa Ziegert within those 40 minutes. On the day Lisa was discovered missing, the local police together with the FBI and the Massachusetts State Police carried out a massive search for her. The search party on foot explored the vicinity of the store while the helicopter searched farther off areas. Additionally, police dogs were brought to the store area in an effort to follow Lisa's track. Sadly, none of these produced any favorable outcomes. On April 17, 1992, the head of the local police department announced that the case had been reclassified from a missing person case to a kidnapping case. This was done because investigators were confident that Lisa had not left the store of her own free will. 2 days after she vanished, the police were already looking into a kidnapping case. On Easter Sunday, April 19th, all the nearby churches prayed for Lisa Ziegert to be found alive and unharmed. Even though it was Easter, there was no sense of celebration. Around 2 p.m. that same day, a call was made to the police. On the outskirts of the town, close to Route 75, a man was walking his dog. He spotted a woman's body while walking through the wooded area. He immediately alerted the police afterwards. When police arrived, they identified the victim as Lisa Ziegert. They discovered multiple stab wounds on her neck and legs, which had been inflicted by a sharp object. Medical professionals later determined that Lisa had also been sexually assaulted. Investigators concluded that her body had been dumped 5 kilometers away from the store, suggesting that the perpetrator had likely transported her there in a vehicle. To preserve any potential evidence, detectives quickly cordoned off the area and proceeded in a single line to secure the site. At the time, it was raining and the muddy road was covered in tire tracks. Sadly, the cops were unable to locate the murder weapon or any other concrete proof. The sad news that Lisa Ziegert had been brutally murdered by an unidentified killer immediately went around the city of Agawam. The church where she taught Sunday school on Sundays, in her honor, organized a farewell service. Around 1,000 people attended the service. People said good things about her. Lisa was loved, and the news of her premature demise made residents of the small community of Agawam, who were used to living in peace and safety, experience a mood that was almost panic. Many store owners canceled single shifts and employees escorted one another to their cars at night. Within a matter of days, the self-defense instructors had a lot of students coming in for classes. Also, roughly 300 women filed for a license to possess a gun. The entire community was terrified that an unidentified criminal would attack one of them again. Amidst all these, the FBI and the police were fervently working on the case nonstop. It soon became public knowledge that they had obtained a DNA sample from the crime scene. The DNA sample might have belonged to the murderer. The investigators at some point brought Lisa's boyfriend in for questioning since they suspected him. He, however, had an alibi and the DNA sample from the crime scene did not match his DNA. Additionally, DNA testing was done on Lisa's friends, coworkers, and relatives, and again, no matches were found. Numerous tips were sent to the police by locals. On the night of Lisa's murder, there were several reports of a strange car. Others claimed to know the offender's identity, but detectives weeded out all of these leads since they were dead ends. The police concluded that a van or a large SUV had left the tire tracks on the road close to where the body was discovered. Despite extensive questioning of drivers with similar vehicles, detectives made little progress in identifying the offender. However, they eventually located a potential witness who might have seen a vehicle of interest that night. Around 9:15 p.m., a worker from a nearby store was heading home when she stopped at a traffic light. She noticed a large SUV pulling off the road and heading toward the area where Lisa's body was later found. Due to the darkness, the woman could not provide specific details about the vehicle but recalled seeing what appeared to be a man and a woman inside. She also mentioned the peculiar fact that the woman's head was oddly jerking, as if she were dozing off or unconscious when the car pulled into the gravel road. Unfortunately, the information did not help in identifying the suspect. Since then, all leads have been exhausted. Police kept working on the case. But as each month went by, the likelihood of cracking this mysterious case diminished before Lisa's family and friends were given another opportunity to learn the truth. An additional year and a half had gone. National television aired an episode about the case in October 1993. The well-liked program featured unresolved case stories that received a ton of attention. This occasionally brought fresh witnesses to the police attention, giving the case new life. Lisa's case was not different. The police received 700 calls from callers with some kind of information within an hour of the broadcast. Most of these leads, as usual, went nowhere, though all of them were looked into by the police. The cops claimed to have found a few worthwhile leads, but they did not say which one. Sadly, it also had little effect. The likelihood of cracking the case significantly decreased with time. The family of Lisa went to tremendous lengths to make sure her legacy was preserved and not forgotten. Despite the early end to Lisa's teaching career, her family had a significant impact on the Agawam's educational system. 3 years after Lisa's murder, in 1995, her parents donated $11,000 specifically to the school's science department, where Lisa worked. These donations were used to support genetics classes and to purchase equipments. Additionally, her parents established a fund for special needs students, which gave them around $35,000 in scholarships. 2002 made it 10 years since Lisa was killed. Still, her mother, D.Z. Gert, held out hope that the case will eventually be solved. She made considerable efforts to preserve her daughter's memories. She partook in every interview and responded to every questions from the media. Each year, she assembled a sizable crowd to light candles in Lisa's memory. During this time, investigators continued their relentless work on Lisa Ziegert's case. The only significant evidence they had was a DNA sample obtained from the alleged murderer. They tirelessly cross-referenced the sample with databases of known criminals, hoping the real suspect would eventually be identified. However, months turned into years, and the killer remained elusive. After 24 long years, on September 24, 2016, investigators decided to take a new approach to solving the case. They then opted for DNA phenotyping. The basic idea behind it is that specialists can determine a person's supposed portrait and physical characteristics from the data contained in their DNA. For example, with the use of DNA, experts can determine a person's gender, their approximate age, eye color, and hair color. Although the portrait created using this data may not always be correct, but occasionally, the coincidence of the portrait matching the face of the real suspect is remarkable. Based on the DNA sample of Lisa's murderer, investigators were able to produce two portraits of the culprit, one at age 25 and the other at age 50. After the photos were released to the public, more than 170 calls were made to the police department. People who made these calls claimed to have seen a similar man. However, the majority of these leads were fruitless. On September 18, 2017, just a year later, police made an unexpected prominent announcement. The offender had been taken into custody. He was identified as Gary Shera, a 49-year-old man. The news of his arrest immediately spread like wildfire throughout the media. Rarely do the police catch the murderer 25 years after the crime was committed. As a result, such stories immediately garner a lot of public interest. The moment Gary Shera was taken into custody, the detectives made public how they had located him. It was discovered that Gary was listed as a suspect in 1993, the year after Lisa was killed. Do you remember that federal television program that resulted in thousands of phone calls with leads for the police? Well, it happened that a Seattle lawyer was one of those callers. At the time, he informed the police that his client might know something about Lisa's death. His client was a woman who was divorcing her spouse at the time. The couple lived in Long Meadow, a town near Agawam. The woman reported that her husband had been unusually fixated on Lisa Ziegert's case during the time it was being broadcast. She mentioned that whenever Lisa's murder was mentioned on TV, her husband would enter the room, fixate on the screen, and stare vacantly, seemingly unaware of anything else happening around him. This behavior raised suspicions, and the husband in question was Gary Shera. At the time of Lisa's murder, he was 24 years old, and was married with a 1-year-old son. Gary Shera and his wife were always arguing and getting into fights, and soon after the birth of their son, they had already started their divorce process. In 1993, according to the police statement, investigators had already developed the notion that Gary was involved in Lisa's murder, but they couldn't find any proof to back it up. Also, his ex-wife, who provided the information, made the police doubt her testimony. And this is because she had a long history of alcohol abuse in addition to a long list of mental illnesses. Additionally, Gary was granted legal custody of their son after the divorce, but his wife secretly transferred the boy to a different state. It's also crucial to note that this wasn't the first time some wives contacted the police to report that their husbands might have been responsible for Lisa Ziegert's death. There were a lot of calls like that, and the police assumed Gary Shera's case was one of them. Despite all these, at a point, Gary was questioned in an interview, but he claimed not to be involved in Lisa's murder and declined to provide a sample of his DNA. With no legal means to force Gary Shera to provide a DNA sample, the police were left with no choice but to focus on him as a suspect. They compiled a list of all the men who had been questioned about the crime but had refused to provide their DNA. Gary Shara's name appeared on this list, and he was repeatedly called in for questioning. In 2008, during his third interview, Shara displayed unusual behavior, trying to avoid touching anything in the room, including the table in front of him. Even when offered a bottle of water, he refused to touch it. He gave off the impression that his only thought was how to prevent the police from getting a sample of his DNA. In 2017, investigators compiled a list of 11 suspects, including Gary Shara. Each of them had declined to willingly provide a DNA sample after being interviewed at various points throughout the investigation. In reality, there were a lot more suspects on that list. But due to DNA phenotyping, detectives were able to exclude the wrong men. These men didn't fit some of the traits that experts got from the DNA sample of Lisa's killer. In August of 2017, having been refused many times by the suspects on the list to provide their DNA, investigators had no other choice but to compile all available evidence and go to court. They asked the court for an order requiring all the 11 members on the compiled list of suspects to submit their DNA samples, to which the court granted their request. The cops visited Gary's apartment on Lathrop Street at Westfield Spring on September 13, 2017 to inform him of this order. But Gary wasn't at home. His roommate with whom they shared the apartment answered the door. The cops gave him their contact address. They also requested that he promptly pass the information to Gary Shara. The following day, an unexpected event took place. Gary Shara's then-girlfriend called the cops and told them that Gary had left 3 letters in her house. To the investigators' surprise, when they opened the letters, Gary Shara had written in details his confession, a last will and testament, and a brief letter of apology to the Ziegert family. I've never really been or even felt normal. From a very young age, I was fascinated by abduction and bondage. I could never keep it too far from my mind for long. On that fateful day, I let myself do something terrible, Gary Shara wrote. In his letter, Gary Shara confessed that although he had no intention of killing Lisa, the situation had spiraled out of control. He admitted to having had several opportunities to turn himself in but confessed to being too much of a coward to do so. Shara revealed that he had lived with years of self-hatred. In the letter's conclusion, he made it clear that he intended to take his own life. Upon reading this, the police immediately began searching for Gary Shara. And soon, his car was found in the parking lot of a hospital in Stafford Springs. Another suicide note was placed on the windshield. It was soon discovered that Gary had taken some harmful drugs to kill himself. But he immediately got into his car and drove to the closest hospital, where the drugs were flushed out of his body system. After the doctors were done tending to him, Gary Shara was arrested and taken into custody. A search warrant for both his apartment and that of his girlfriend's was simultaneously issued by a judge. The police discovered numerous items that contained his DNA there. When these items were tested for a DNA sample, it was not surprising that Gary Shara was Lisa Ziegert's killer because the DNA found on the items in his home 100% matched the DNA sample found on Lisa Ziegert's body. Aside from this, investigators also had several other potentially important leads. Joyce McDonald Shara, Gary's wife, who had first raised concerns about him in 1993, had sadly passed away in 2014. Investigators uncovered disturbing documents written by Gary Shara's wife's attorney, which provided alarming details. One day, Gary had told his wife bluntly that he couldn't engage in intimacy unless he was holding a knife. The day after Lisa's murder, the woman called her sister, revealing that Gary had returned home late that night with scratches all over his body and appeared visibly disturbed. Furthermore, Gary gave his wife a music box claiming he had bought it from the same gift and card store where Lisa worked. These details added to the mounting suspicion surrounding Gary Shara. But according to Gary, it was an older woman who actually sold it to him. The issue is that there had never before been such an employee at the store. It is unclear why the police was not informed about all of these details in 1993. And it is impossible to find out now because the woman who had the information has died. Gary Shara kept declaring his innocence while in custody and refused to admit to his wrongdoings. He most likely acted out of pure fear. But with that much evidence against him, There was no way out for him to get away with his crimes. He only succeeded in delaying his sentence, and that was all. The trial wasn't scheduled to start for another 2 years, but Gary, who had been in prison the entire time, decided to confess to his crime. According to Massachusetts law, a defendant facing a first-degree murder charge faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. Lisa Ziegert's family and friends were present in the courtroom, including her mother, Dee Ziegert, who had spent 25 years hoping for answers about her daughter's murder. She expressed her gratitude to everyone involved in the investigation, as well as to the compassionate citizens who had supported her family throughout the years. While Lisa had finally received the justice she deserved, Dee acknowledged that emotional closure would never truly be attained. Ziegert's case being solved after 25 years is both a bittersweet and significant moment. It underscores the resilience of her family, especially her parents, who never gave up seeking justice for their daughter despite the long wait. While it brings a sense of closure and accountability with Gary Shara's life sentence, it's impossible to fully erase the pain and loss that Lisa's family and loved ones continue to carry. The case also highlights the importance of persistence in investigations and how advancements in DNA technology can ultimately bring justice, even when it seems elusive. It's a reminder of the long-lasting impact of such tragedies on families and communities, and a relentless pursuit of truth, no matter how much time has passed. Moving on to the next case. Jennifer Watkins. On November 6, 1999, Jennifer Watkins failed to return home after her shift at Memorial Hospital, prompting her husband, Michael Watkins, to contact the Fountain Police Department and report her missing. That same day, Irene Skinner, Jennifer's mother, who cared for her grandchildren, reached out to the Colorado Springs Police Department after her daughter did not show up to pick them up. A missing person report was quickly initiated by the Colorado Springs Police Department. In the early stages of the investigation, detectives and patrol officers conducted several interviews with Jennifer's family members and co-workers. With Michael Watkins' assistance, they were able to locate Jennifer's car in an employee parking area near Printers Parkway and East Ikes Peak Avenue. The car was impounded, but no evidence or clues linking Jennifer Watkins' disappearance were found during the subsequent search. Investigators continued their efforts, conducting interviews with people at the Memorial Hospital where she worked. On November 8, 1999, while at the hospital, detectives received a call around 10 a.m. reporting the discovery of a body behind a stairwell in a section of the hospital still under construction. 2 Dover elevator service workers, who had entered the stairwell on the 8th level to inspect and repair an elevator shaft, were struck by a strong, unpleasant odor as they approached the area. When the elevator staff peered under the stairwell, they noticed what appeared to be the outline of a body bound with duct tape and covered in plastic. On request, the scene was immediately visited by investigators from the Colorado Springs Police Department Homicide Unit, Metro Crime Lab, and the El Paso County Coroner's Office. After the investigators removed the plastic, they found a deceased white female adult with brown hair. The victim was dressed in a purple blouse, black slacks, and a teal uniform smock. Her clothing was laid out in a way that suggested a sexual assault had taken place. Detectives questioned a number of workers and contractors at Memorial Hospital throughout the course of the investigation. No suspect was found despite looking into more potential suspect leads. The deceased adult female's autopsy was soon completed by the El Paso County Coroner's Office, and she turned out to be 23 years old Jennifer Watkins, who suddenly went missing a few days back. According to David Bowerman, the coroner for El Paso at the time, Jennifer had died of blunt force trauma to the head. Her death was determined to be a homicide. The question of who killed Jennifer Watkins bugged the police and her family for years. Jennifer Lee Watkins was born on November 24, 1975 to William and Irene Skinner in Methuen, Massachusetts. She was the second of 4 children, and Joseph, her youngest brother, held a special place in her heart. Jennifer obtained her high school diploma from Hanover, Colorado High School. She enjoyed socializing with friends and caring for her pets. Jennifer loved playing volleyball and wished to help people. Her love for music made her join the school band as a clarinetist. Jennifer Watkins desired a career as a nurse. She and her husband, Michael Watkins, married on the April 8, 1995. And roughly 3 years later, Michael was hired as a maintenance worker at the Memorial Hospital in Colorado Springs. Not long after, Jennifer was also hired there as a dietitian. The investigators worked tirelessly to bring justice to Jennifer's family. As part of the crime scene processing, a close inspection of the plastic used to wrap Jennifer Watkins' body turned up some hairs, fibers, and a yellow-whitish stain that was eventually identified as cement. At the autopsy, further biological evidence was also gathered. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation received a number of pieces of evidence for analysis. In addition to the victim's DNA profile, 2 other DNA profiles were created from the evidence items submitted for processing. The plastic wrap, the victim's pants, and semen samples taken at the autopsy were used to create these profiles. Although the semen found in Jennifer Watkins' pants and in the plastic wrap matched each other, they did not match the sample taken during the autopsy. A number of potential suspects had their biological samples taken, and all of them had been exonerated because their DNA did not match the 2 unidentified DNA samples. Although there were security cameras installed all over the hospital facility, the pictures were too blurry to be of much help. Police originally concentrated on those with access to the crime site, but there were no leads. They then shifted concentration on Michael Watkins, who worked night shift in the hospital's housekeeping division. Irene Skinner, Jennifer Watkins' mother, had her doubts about Michael. According to Irene, her daughter's life took a different turn after she moved in with her husband, Michael Watkins, whom she had attended grade school with. Irene Skinner reported that Michael Watkins struggled with drug use, and more often than not, Jennifer required multiple visits to the emergency as a result of domestic abuse. Also, in addition to his volatile personality and tumultuous relationship with Jennifer, Michael Watkins had wrought ends with the law in the past, which involved criminal mischief and a Peloton incident. He was, however, interrogated multiple times as the investigation progressed, and he complied fully with all the proceedings. Michael admitted he had an affair with Jennifer since one of the DNA found on Jennifer Watkins' body came from him. He, however, denied killing her. After obtaining a warrant, they searched Michael Watkins' home and discovered a pair of pants that seemed to be covered in blood. An analysis of the object revealed that it was blood, but it was Michael's blood. The 2 DNA samples that were taken from the crime scene didn't provide any answers. Even if the one from Jennifer's body matched Michael's DNA, it didn't raise a red flag because Michael was married to Jennifer. The other DNA sample from the plastic was unknown. The police asked Michael Watkins to take a polygraph test to which he consented and passed. Even though Michael was still a suspect, the detectives looked at other possibilities. They focused on a male hospital employee who mysteriously left town without warning or collecting his final salary immediately after the murder of Jennifer. During investigation, detectives soon discovered that the man was on probation for a murder in Louisiana, which he claimed was self-defense. When authorities located him, he rejected all accusations of involvement in Jennifer Watkins' murder and consented to provide a DNA sample. His DNA, however, didn't match the DNA discovered at the crime site where Jennifer was killed. Following a thorough investigation, no suspect was found, and the case eventually became cold. Numerous investigators have been trying to identify a suspect in Jennifer Watkins for the past 21 years without success. Jennifer's case remained unresolved for a while. Over the years, technological advancements and familial DNA analysis occurred. Between 2017 and 2018, cold case investigators with the help of Parabon Nanolabs, a Virginia-based DNA technology business, used DNA phenotyping to determine the physical characteristics and ancestry of the unidentified DNA evidence at the crime scene. The suspect traits was predicted using the DNA evidence found in Jennifer Watkins. Parabon made an individual prediction of the suspect's ancestry, eye color, hair color, skin tone, freckling, and face shape. A snapshot composite was created by combining these physical characteristics to show what the suspect would have looked like at age 25. And with an average body mass index of 22. Due to the fact that age and body mass index cannot be established from DNA, these default values were utilized. In an effort to generate leads, these photos were subsequently released to the public. The findings showed that the murderer had fair skin, blue or green eyes, blonde or brown hair, and was around 25 years old when the crime occurred. However, investigators were able to focus on a person who police had actually interrogated in 1999 after using genetic genealogy to narrow down the suspect. The killer was Ricky Sievert. According to a check of the original case report, Ricky Sievert, who was 29 at the time of the murder, was questioned by investigators on November 19, 1999 as a part of the initial homicide investigation. He was employed by Memorial Hospital and was a member of the maintenance team. He started working there in April 1998. According to Ricky Sievert's work schedule that he provided during his interview, on November 5, 1999, the day Jennifer Watkins was last seen, he would have been working a swing shift. Additionally, he denied ever having met Jennifer Watkins when asked. Finally, the culprit has been identified, but sadly, further investigation revealed that on November 2, 2001, 2 years after Jennifer Watkins' murder, Ricky Sievert was killed in a car accident on Highway 94, just east of Colorado Springs. The investigators, however, obtained DNA samples from the suspect's living relatives. According to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, the proportion of the population that may be excluded as a contributor to the DNA gathered in this case is 99.99994%. It means Ricky Sievert cannot be excluded. The 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office received the Jennifer Watkins case on October 1, 2020 for examination. The District Attorney's Office is certain that Ricky Sievert killed Jennifer Watkins. The investigation into the murder of Jennifer Watkins will be closed as exceptionally clear due to the death of the offender, Ricky Sievert, who passed away in a car accident in 2001. After all these years, we are grateful to finally provide Jennifer Watkins' family with the answers they deserve. Regardless of the time that has passed, we remain committed to serving this community. I am proud of the cold case detectives who, over the past 21 years, have never stopped working. For Ms. Watkins, they never lost sight of what was most important, finding the truth for the Watkins family. We also extend our gratitude to our partners who assisted in this case. We would not have been able to solve this case without your time, skill, and dedication, said Colorado Springs Police Department Chief Vince Nisk.